With no further ado, I'll give the floor to Reina Mendez, the new representative for the Central Region. I'd like to thank the team of from El Salvador. I don't know if they're connected, but I'd like to thank them, especially Nestor, who was representative of the Central Region for a couple of years. Thank you so much for your support. I give the floor to you, Rina. She will be giving us some opening words, and then there who will be in charge of the introduction. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, distinguished members and collaborators who are with us in this conference. I would like to welcome you all from the city of Guatemala as a representative of the Central Region from OIMA. It's a pleasure to share with you in this meeting, in this ordinary meeting in May, as part of the regional network to analyze basic grains in Latin America and the Caribbean during this space where we're sharing information amongst members. This is extremely crucial, and I'd like you to share valuable information so that we can take it into account for decision making within our institutions for the well-being of our countries and the population within our countries. I'd like to thank you all for your efforts, as well as your willingness amongst your institutions and your personal willingness to be part of this event. I'd like to thank El Salvador, who are leaving aside the regional representation and who coordinated actions within the network in the past. We will foster efforts to make sure that we can reach the goals and plans, and we hope to have the collaboration of all of those present today. We are here at your service to listen, to reach agreements, and to be a reference within the other networks of OIMA, of OAS. I'd like to share all the information, and thank you very much. We hope that the information is really enriching so that we can all reach the purposes which we set ourselves to follow. Thank you very much and have a great day. Thank you very much, Rina. Welcome as representative of the Central Region. Luis, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Rina, for those words. Thank you for undertaking this leadership, which we will be needing in the future. Thank you, Monica. Thank you to all members who have been part of this today. As FuseNet, our strength is to all work together, to be able to share, to work together, to learn from each other, from the work that we are all doing, from the challenges that we've been experiencing. Being part of this forum where we can share information and experiences means that we can strengthen each other within our institutions, and it allows us all to follow a better line of work. Thank you very much once again, everyone. Let's continue, and we hope we have a great meeting. Thank you very much, Luis, and I'm sorry I missed a detail here. This meeting is taking place in Zoom, and we'd like to thank the MIR and Caro for coordinating efforts to have interpreting, to have simultaneous interpreting. If anyone needs to listen to this presentation and watch the slides in English, please select the language of your preference in the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Please select the language of your preference so that you don't face any difficulties during the meeting. Thank you very much. Let's get started with today's topics, and we're going to get started with agriculture and weather with Mario. Mario is going to tell me if you want me to share the screen or would you like to share it yourself. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, and I hope everyone's having a great day. Can everyone see the presentation? Yes. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get starting with our conference regarding agriculture and weather for May 2024. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the conditions we've had. We have high temperatures in the region. It is no secret that temperatures have been quite high, and the analyses we've conducted show that the difference between the historically average temperature compared to the minimal temperatures that we have right now, we find that they're quite close. So there's a significant feeling of heat. And we've had highs and lows throughout the day that have included higher highs. The humidity has been low in the soil, also in terms of the rivers, the flows of the river flows. So that has caused issues with irrigation because we don't have enough water in the rivers, and also given the low level of humidity, the wells have been affected. If we look at rains in the region, in some areas, especially in the northern Central American countries, as well as Panama, conditions for a long period of time have been poor. We see the map here from the 6th of February to the 5th of May, and we look at the northern region in Guatemala, including La Paz and Zabala, connected to the western part of Honduras in the Copan area, show that rains have been no higher than 45% of the usual levels that we've had over the last 3 months. In the area that you see marked in red in the central part of Honduras, as well as the western part of El Salvador and the central part and eastern part of Guatemala, rains have not been over 60% of their usual numbers. In Central America, we can see that they're 75 to 90% in the dry regions of Costa Rica, they're 45 to 60. And the same thing happens in the central part of Panama. In the Dominican Republic, the rains have been above average, but this is due to recent events that have taken place in the country. During the last 2 months, we have seen that conditions have not improved. On the contrary, when we see places where rains have not gone over 45%, this includes the central part of Honduras, also the western part of Guatemala, which includes a range of 45 to 60%, and this has worsened between Costa Rica and Nicaragua over the last 2 months, as well as the central region in Panama. And in the last month, from the 6th of April to the 5th of May, if we look at the graph on the right-hand side, we can see obvious changes in terms of the rains, and in the whole Central American region, from the dry part of Costa Rica going through the center of Nicaragua and Honduras, the western part of El Salvador, and the central part of Guatemala, they have not been over 60%. This is for the rain levels. So what's happening? Aside from the fact that the rains have been less than average, we're also getting higher temperatures than average temperatures. If we look at the Pacific and northern part of Guatemala, the Gulf of Fonseca, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua, temperatures have been above 35 degrees Celsius. Only in some areas like the central part of Costa Rica and the Panama region in the border with Costa Rica, as well as some of the central areas in Guatemala, temperatures have been between 25, around 25 degrees Celsius and degrees, and then 25, except the center of Guatemala, where we've had between 18 and 23 degrees Celsius. In general, temperatures have been much higher than normal. So we have
generan
rainfall that
por
is
arriba del
lower
promedio,
than average
lo
and
que nos
temperature which is higher
provoca
than average,
es
which has, of course,
bajos valores en la salud de la
resulted
vegetación,
in
tal y como podemos ver acá,
low
para la región
health levels for
de Centroamérica y
vegetation
también
in the
para
Central
las
American
condiciones del valor de precipitación
region
son
and Haiti.
bastante bajos en toda la región.
Rainfall has been
Ya
quite
mucha
low
vegetación
throughout
está
the
solamente
region.
en el centro de Costa Rica, pero ya sabemos que eso se debe a
The
cuestiones
central part of Costa Rica
climatológicas
is
también, donde
noteworthy, but
donde
this is
la
due to
gente
topographical
usualmente tiende a coincidir,
reasons
pero
because of the
por lo
humidity that they usually
general
have in the
siempre
Caribbean. But in
la región se
general,
encuentra muy por debajo
vegetation
del
in the
promedio.
region
Y acá
is
tenemos que
much
hacer
lower than
un
average.
análisis un poco más profundo
And
y es
here we
que
have to conduct
estos
a
valores de vegetación
more in-depth
corresponden
analysis because
a,
these
a vegetación
vegetation
natural dentro de
levels
las zonas, es decir, las zonas que son secas tienen
are
vegetaciones
regarding natural
durante
vegetation.
seco,
In other
pero a
words,
pesar de eso no
areas
han
that
podido
are usually
adaptarse
dry,
a los cambios bruscos
but they
en
have
el patrón
not
de
been able
precipitaciones y
to
las
adapt to the
temperaturas
abrupt
bajas.
changes in the
Esto evidentemente
patterns
no
of
ha tenido un
rainfall and
efecto
temperature.
en cuanto a las
So
actividades
this
de siembra que ya
has
hemos
had
podido
an
observar en una
effect
gira de campo que se realizó
when
acá
planting.
en Guatemala
We managed
hace
to see
un
this
par de
during
semanas, en donde
a
se espera un retraso
trip
en el inicio
out in the
de la
field in
época de siembra,
Guatemala,
ya que
and it looks
las
like
lluvias
the
indican
planting
que
season is going
esperamos
to
que
be
la
delayed
temporada de lluvias se
because
restablezca, no se
the
inicie,
farmers are
se
waiting for
establezca. Y
the
evidentemente han existido pocas precipitaciones en la
rainy
región y los
season
estragos
to
no
be
pueden ser
settled, not to start, but to be settled
exentos de
properly.
la temporada
So there are
de
obvious
riego.
delays.
Pero
This
si nos
is
vamos ya hacia la parte del pronóstico,
regarding
podemos ver que
the
la
planting season.
temperatura
If we look at
promedio
the
promedio
forecast, we
durante
can
este
see the
tiempo
temperatures,
podríamos tener un
above
inicio
average
irregular
temperatures are
de la
going
temporada
to
de lluvias
remain in the
debido a
region.
las
We'll have an
fluctuaciones del
irregular
sistema. Y esto
beginning of the
podría dar
rainy
lugar
season.
a
Let's not
que
forget
estas
there's a
lluvias
transition period going on right
lleguen
now, and
también
this
y
means we'll
probablemente
have
estén ocurriendo,
abundant
pero
rainfall,
seguido de una
copious rainfall for a short
situación que
period
se
of
refiere a
time,
los agricultores que
followed
van
by
a
several
tener que
days with no
establecimientos
rain. That's
agrícolas.
why
Las
the
condiciones ENSO en transición
farmers are
al inicio de
waiting
la
for
temporada
the
de
rainy season to be
lluvias de
settled.
este
Then we have ENSO
2024.
conditions
Sin
as a
embargo, sin
transition at the
embargo,
beginning of the
las
rainy season
expectativas a
2024.
medida que la estación
We are
progrese, es
expecting
decir,
the
que podríamos
rainfall
tener un
to
inicio irregular de la
increase
época de
as
lluvias
the
con un
season
patrón errático en la
progresses.
distribución
So we'll
de
have
la
an erratic
precipitación, pero
pattern in terms
conforme
of
nos vayamos acercando
distribution
a
of
la
time and
temporada
space
lluviosa,
as we
pues la
start
segunda
progressing
temporada
within
y
the
el
rainy
pronóstico.
season.
Y esto es básicamente lo que nos dice
The
acá en
forecast
cuanto al
is the
modelo
rainfall will go up.
dominiqueño. Podemos
That's
ver
what
que
we're
tanto
following
Estados
here,
Unidos
following
como
the
toda Centroamérica
North
y el Caribe,
American
incluyendo
model. We
zonas
can
como el
see that
promedio de
for
México, del sur de México, muestran
the
condiciones de lluvias
June
por
to
debajo del
August,
promedio.
Central
Para
America
periodo julio-septiembre
and
y
Mexico
entonces
region
es
will have
interesante de este periodo
rainfall above average.
muy
The
interesante
same
que
for
está
July to
bajo el
September.
periodo de la
What's
canícula,
noteworthy
ya
here
que el periodo
is that
regular
this will
podría no ser
include
muy
the heat
significativo en
wave
cuanto a los días en la
period.
distribución de
So it's
lluvias,
quite
pero las
significant
condiciones
that we'll have
climáticas
days
por arriba del promedio, porque
where
estamos revisando
conditions
el mes de
will
agosto y
tend to
septiembre,
be
que
above
es
average
justamente el periodo donde
throughout
tenemos el inicio de
August
la segunda
and
época de lluvia.
October to
El
October when
periodo
we have
septiembre-noviembre es
the
el periodo
second rainy
máximo
season.
de
For
precipitaciones para
September and
toda la época de
November,
lluvia
we'll have
y
rainfall
ambos
above average,
oscilan entre un
but
40 y
the
50%,
values are
lo
between
cual
40 and
es
50%,
significativo estadísticamente. Y ya para el
which is
periodo de
statistically
octubre, noviembre,
significant
octubre, diciembre,
anyway.
la
And
tendencia
from
al crecimiento
October to
climático
December,
promedio se mantiene
rainfall will
en la
be
región,
above
exceptuando
average in
hasta
the
El Salvador.
region,
Usualmente
except
no tenemos
Guatemala and El
precipitaciones
Salvador, where we
en
usually
esta época del
don't have
año.
rainfall
Para
during
la
that part of the
República
year.
Dominicana, la señal
For
de
the Dominican
precipitaciones por
Republic,
arriba del promedio
the
es
forecast of
consistente en todo
rainfall
el año.
of above
Y el
average
modelo
rainfall
europeo nos
is
dice
that
que
it will be
durante
consistent
junio,
throughout the
julio y
year. The
mayo
European
tendremos
model tells us the
precipitaciones
same
por
thing.
arriba del promedio.
From May
Lo
to
mismo para
July,
junio,
we'll have
julio,
above
agosto. Y por
average
último, para
rainfall, the same
septiembre,
for
es
July,
bueno resaltar
June, July, and August, and
que se
then from
tendrá,
August to
siempre
September,
lo
the
que
same
podemos
thing.
observar en esta
We
zona
should point
es que
out
nuestra
that, as we can
precipitación
see in
aumenta
this
por
area,
arriba del promedio
there's
en el
copious
Pacífico,
rainfall above
y
average
tendrá también
in the
impacto
Pacific
negativo en el
region, which
desarrollo de
could
cultivos
also have a
por
negative impact
precipitaciones o deslizamientos que
on
pudiesen
the
dañar
develop
el grano
on the
y los
crops
ciclos
because
germinales que
of
tendríamos en la zona.
landslides,
En
or
cuanto a la Organización Meteorológica
also
Mundial, pues también podemos notar
floods.
que la señal de
And if we
precipitaciones
look
por
at the
arriba del promedio
worldwide
es constante para toda la región.
pattern, we can see that the rainfall pattern is constant throughout the Central
Y el
American
aspecto
region.
conservador
Regarding the
es
temperature, if we
la
look at the
parte de
conservative North
islas de
American
Guatemala, las
model,
áreas de Nicaragua y Costa
it
Rica
shows that
y Honduras
Guatemala, some
tuvieron unas
parts
condiciones
of
de
Nicaragua and
temperaturas
Honduras
favorables durante
may
ese periodo de
show
junio-agosto.
above average
Y esto se
temperature
mantiene
from June
durante
to
julio y
August.
septiembre,
And the
pero
same
a
thing would
partir de
remain in
octubre
from
pasará
July
a
to
ser algo
September.
más
But from
paulatina
August to
y a
October, we'll
medida
see
que
a
el pronóstico
progressive
va
reduction
avanzando de esas condiciones de temperatura por
as
arriba
part
del
of the
promedio.
forecast
Sin embargo,
for
el
above average
modelo
temperatures.
europeo es bastante
However,
claro,
the
es el que
European model is quite
conocen
clear
ustedes,
in the
casi toda
sense that
América va a tener
not
temperaturas
only
por
in
arriba del
Central
promedio y el
America, but
promedio
almost the
es lo
whole of
que
the
es
continent will
observación.
have above
Entonces
average
también con ese
temperatures throughout the
pequeño
observation
modelo
period, which is also
de la
consistent
Organización Meteorológica Mundial
with
o
the
el modelo que
OMM
tenemos de la Organización
model,
Meteorológica Mundial.
with
Entonces
the
podríamos decir que
World
niveles por arriba
Meteorological,
del promedio, temperaturas por arriba del
okay,
promedio,
and will have
y
above
esto nos
average
lleva a las siguientes conclusiones.
temperature
Condiciones de
and
suelo
rainfall,
secas
which
con
leads
las
us to the following
temperaturas más
conclusions that
elevadas
we'll
de la
have dry
estación por debajo del
soil,
nivel
high
promedio que se
temperature,
inicia en la
and
temporada de lluvias podrían afectar
rainfall
el
that will be below average at the
siguiente
beginning of the
ciclo
rainfall, and this
agrícola
could
para los agricultores
affect
que dependen
the
de la
agricultural
precipitación
cycle,
porque ellos
both
utilizan
for
sistemas de riego.
farmers who
A pesar de
depend
que
on
tenemos una tendencia
rainfall,
a
as well as those
que
who
inicie
depend
la
on
temporada
irrigation.
lluviosa, la misma podría ser
Regarding
errática y en tiempo y espacio. Y esto es
the
fundamental porque
erratic
esto implicaría también que no
beginning
todos los
of the
agricultores iniciarían las siembras al
rainy
tiempo.
season,
Lluvias y
that
temperaturas
means
por
that
arriba del
in
promedio
terms of
son
time and
clave para la
space,
temporada
we may
agrícola
have
y
delays. They may not all be able
por
to start at the same
consiguiente
time.
se
Then we
debe
expect
mantener un monitoreo
temperatures
de las
that will
áreas que
be
se
above
pueden ver
average
afectadas por inundaciones y
during the
deslizamientos,
agricultural
así
season
como
in
también
2024, and
un
some areas may
manejo
be affected by
adecuado
floods or
para
landslides.
las plagas y
We
enfermedades que puedan darse en el
will, of course,
cultivo
have to
de los cultivos de
appropriately
granos básicos. Recordemos que el
manage
año pasado, dada
plagues
esa
and other
condición de
conditions
altas
for basic
temperaturas,
grains.
tuvimos
Let's
la
not forget that last
aparición
year, because
de
of high
varias plagas,
temperatures,
principalmente en el cultivo de
we had
frijol, que mermaron
some
significativamente los rendimientos, al
issues
menos en el
with
tipo algas
beans, and
importantes
this
en
had an
Guatemala
impact, a
y El
significant
Salvador.
impact
Por mi
in some
parte
areas
es
of
todo.
Guatemala and El
Si tienen
Salvador.
dudas o preguntas,
That's
pues con
all for
gusto
now.
podría
If you have any
responderlas.
questions, please go ahead. They're always
Muchas
welcome.
gracias, Mario. Si tienen alguna
Thank you very much,
consulta,
Mario.
pueden levantar
If
la
you have any
mano.
questions,
Martín,
please put your
adelante.
hand up. We have a question here. Go ahead. Yes, I have a question.
Sí, adelante, don
Yes, go ahead.
Quiero ver bien. Sí,
Yes, Marco
bueno,
Julio
adelante,
Galvez here.
Marco. Luego tenemos otra
Go ahead,
pregunta
Marco.
de, quiero ver, Cámara Nacional de Productores, creo. Entonces, adelante y luego vamos con la otra.
Go ahead, please. And then we'll go. I'm wondering if we have the convergence zone information and if you have any forecasts so that we can tell when the rainfall is going to start in Honduras.
Sí, gracias por la
Thank
pregunta.
you.
La
Thank you for
cicloconvergencia
your
intertropical
question.
sí estuvo
Regarding the
creciendo
intertropical
bastante
convergence
fuerte
area, it has been on the
en esta
rise,
región. Sin
as it
embargo,
usually
nosotros
is during
estamos
this
en un
period.
periodo de
But
transición,
let's
pues
not
las
forget
lluvias van
that
a
since we're undergoing a
tardar un
transition
poco
period,
más
rainfall will
en
take a little
establecerse. De
longer
acuerdo al pronóstico
to
del
actually be
Foro
settled.
Centroamericano del Clima,
So,
que fue convocado
regarding
en
the
Honduras por
Central
Administración Petro,
American Weather
ellos
Forum
esperan
in
un
Honduras,
leve retraso
COPECO,
en cuanto al inicio de
they
la
are expecting a
temporada
slight
lluviosa,
delay
el cual se
for
va
the
a dar
beginning of the rainy
dependiendo de las
season,
regiones que
which
tienen
will, of
el
course,
país.
depend on the
En ese
regions
sentido, pues nosotros como
of
FUSNET
the different regions in the
tenemos
country.
información a nivel
In
general,
FuseNet, we
pero
can
siempre
provide
agradecemos
general
este tipo de
information, but
consultas un poco más precisas
we always
que orienten
appreciate
hacia los
these
servicios meteorológicos
more
nacionales, pues respetamos mucho la competencia de cada uno de
specific
ellos
questions.
por los distintos socios
We would have to
que
refer you
tenemos
to the
en la
different
región. Pero
meteorological
en el foro del clima ellos
centers
sí
within the
estiman
region,
que podría esperarse un retraso
but
en
in
cuanto al
the
inicio y
climate
establecimiento
forum, we
de la
did talk
época
about a
lluviosa,
delay
principalmente en la
of
región
the rainy season, especially for it to
suroriental
be
del
fully
país.
settled, especially in the eastern part of the
Buenos
country.
días, Carlos Salazar de la Cámara Nacional
Good
de
morning,
Productores
Carlos
de Costa
Salazar
Rica.
from the
Mi pregunta iría en relación
National
a
Dairy
este
Association of
año
Costa Rica. I have a
bastantes días de
question
mayo y no
which
hemos
is
iniciado la
related
temporada
with,
lluviosa, por lo menos en el
we're well
Caribe
into May and
de
the
Costa
rainy
Rica,
season
que
has
sí
not
estuvo
started
esperado
in the
que fuera a finales
Caribbean
de abril
part
y
of
hasta
Costa
finales de
Rica.
mayo.
And the center. We were expecting it to happen at the end of April, beginning of May. And this seems to be a widespread phenomenon around the region. So it looks like we may have to wait a little longer because of El Nino. And regarding El Nino, in previous presentations, I recall having seen clearly that around this time of the year, the phenomenon was over. Then we had sort of neutral period, and then we had a trend that led to La Nina. I missed some of this, so I've forgotten if we've seen what it looks like per quarter, whether it's going to be El Nino, La Nina, or neutral period. I'm not sure if it's in your presentation and if you can go back to it so that we can see what the forecast is for this year. Thank you very much. Thank you for your question. No, I did not include that slide because it will be updated tomorrow, in fact. And you would probably get the image only until today. However, I'm going to share my screen once again. Hang on.
No sé si pueden ver ahí mi pantalla ahora.
Sí,
Not
sí
sure if you
está.
can see my screen now.
Nada más tendría que regresarse en la presentación.
Yes, we
No
can see your
aparece
screen, but you have to
la
go
presentación todavía.
back a step. You have to go a step back in
¿Ven
the
la
presentation.
presentación?
You can still see your presentation.
Sí,
Ah,
la última lámina de la presentación.
Yes, we can see the last slide of your
ok.
presentation.
Ahora sí ven
Oh, okay.
Ahora sí.
How about now? Can you see it?
Ok, perfecto.
Okay.
Entonces,
Can you see the
ese
graph?
es
Perfect.
el pronóstico que
So
tenemos para el
this is the
periodo de
forecast
inicios
for
de abril.
the
Si hacemos
early
aquí una
April
gráfica, nosotros ahorita
period. And if
estamos
we look at the
en el
graph right
periodo
now,
de abril, mayo
we're
y
looking at
junio.
the April,
Es
May,
decir, que
June
estamos en este
period.
periodo de
In
transición,
other
porque
words,
acá
we're
estábamos
undergoing
entrando
this
en el El
transition
Niño
period.
y
Here we
ahora
had El
estamos en el periodo
Nino
de transición
conditions,
al
and
Niño.
now we're
Entonces, ¿qué es
undergoing
lo que pasa en este
a
periodo?
transition to the neutral
Es que la
conditions. So what
atmósfera
happens during this
y
transition
como
period?
las
Well,
condiciones oceánicas no es que tengan un acople
given
inmediato,
the
ellos llevan un
ocean
tiempo en
conditions, the
lograr
atmosphere takes some
reflejarse estas condiciones.
time
Ese
to
es el
reflect these
acople
conditions. It doesn't happen
abrasivo. Ya
immediately. And that's
estamos
the
en el
reason why,
periodo de condiciones
even
neutras.
though we have
Seguimos
reached a
en
quarter of
niño
neutral
remanente
conditions, we
que
still
estamos,
have
si no estamos en niño, pero
a
realmente estamos
remainder of
en esa
conditions, or some of
transición
these
hacia
conditions.
condiciones
So it's not like we're in El Nino
neutras.
still.
Puedo mover
It's just that we're
lo que son
transitioning
las
to the neutral
condiciones
conditions.
de la niña a medida que
And then
el
we'll move
nivel
on
de
to
lluvia
La
avanza.
Nina
Y
conditions
esto
as
lo que
the
vamos a tener,
rainy season
lo que ocurre
progresses.
es un aumento
What normally
en
happens
el
is we
nivel
have an increase
de las precipitaciones y en los
of
acumulados y días con lluvia
rainfall
que tendríamos. También es
and the number
importante
of
esto,
rainy
no lo
days.
incluí acá porque
It's
estamos
also
esperando la
important
información de
to
NOAA,
point
pero
this out. I
nosotros
didn't include
estamos
it
en
because
esa
we're waiting for the
comunicación.
NOAA information
Si la
and they haven't
Universidad de
published this yet,
Colorado
but
establece que
in
el
the University of
periodo de
Colorado,
huracanes estaría por
they
encima
have
del promedio en la cuenca
pointed
del
out that
Caribe
the
y
hurricane
esto
season will be
también
higher than
es
average
muy
in
bueno
the
porque
Caribbean basin.
estos eventos podría
And it's important to
generar
monitor
grandes
this because
masivos e impactos
any of
mayores en
these
la
things
región
could
centroamericana
have a
debido a los
significant
oceanárgos que ellos
impact on the
utilizaron.
Central American region.
Algunos son bastante
If we look
coincidentes
at
con lo que ocurre en los países
analogous years, they're
centroamericanos latinos.
consistent with what was
Entonces, la
pointed out in the
mayoría de
Central
los años
American
va a ser una
Climate
lluvia que va a
Forum.
ser
And
importante en
the rainy
este
season is going to
periodo de
be quite
transición.
important
Y
after this
también hay que
transition
recordar
period.
que vamos por el
We
tercer
must
año
also
consecutivo con
remember
un
that
aumento
this is a third
significativo
consecutive
de
year
las
with a significant
temperaturas,
increase
aunque ahora lo
in
sentimos un
temperatures,
poco más,
even though right now
por las
feel it,
condiciones secas previas que
we
hemos
feel
tenido
them
y
as
aunado
higher,
obviamente El Niño.
given
Si
the
observamos
dry
la tendencia es que
conditions
las
as a result
temperaturas
of
estén
El Nino.
aumentando,
However,
las
the trend
condiciones
is that
de
the
alta
temperatures are going to go
temperatura y
up.
alta humedad, pues
And if we add
evidentemente van a
high
favorecer
temperatures and high
unos eventos
humidity,
extremos de
this is naturally
precipitaciones
going
en un
to
corto periodo de tiempo, pero a su vez
uh,
abundante,
lead
lo que en
to
algunos
high
casos
precipitation periods
desafortunadamente
for
puede
short periods of
favorecer
time,
que
but it's going to be quite
tengamos una
copious.
infiltración de humedad en el
And
suelo, si no es así como que
naturally,
todo se va
this
por el
doesn't
torrente
favor the
y generan
infiltration of
inundaciones
humidity.
y deslizamientos. Pero sí,
Instead, it's
como
going
ven
to
en esta
generate
gráfica va a cambiar
runoff and
desde
floods
cuando
and
al caso
landfalls.
de hoy estamos
This
en
is
un
going to
periodo de
change
transición,
tomorrow
este de
by
transición
noon,
hacia
but according to
condiciones
the information we
neutras.
have
No sé si
to date,
eso
we
aclara
are
un
going
poco
through
su
a
duda.
transition to
Muchísimas
neutral
gracias la respuesta, muy amplio y
conditions.
también gracias a
Thank you very
Kevin
much for that
por haber
in-depth
respondido en el chat con el link de la página.
for that in-depth answer. And thank you very much, John, for answering in the chat and including the link to the page so we can see this information.
Muchas gracias. Tenemos
Thank
una
you
última
very
intervención.
much.
Dimas,
We have a
adelante.
last question. Dimas, go ahead,
Muchas
please.
gracias. Buenos días a todos.
Thank you
Mira,
very
esta
much and
pregunta
good morning, everyone.
es una
More than a
consideración
question,
en
it's
cuanto
a comment
en cuanto a
regarding
la permanencia de la lluvia, el pronóstico de lluvia para
the
agosto, septiembre.
rainy
Mario mencionaba de que
the
las
rain
probablemente
forecast for or the rainfall forecast for August and
casi cayesen
September,
un poco tarde
and hopefully the fact that it
y
could
la parte
remain. We
vitivinícola
understand
vaya a ser húmeda.
that
Entonces,
planting will start a bit
básicamente
late,
aquí es como
and
una
the
alerta,
heat
pequeña
wave
alerta
and the fact that
sobre
the heat wave will be a bit humid.
las posibles pérdidas que
So
podrían
I'm just
provocarse
alerting
debido
everyone
al exceso
regarding
de lluvia
the
en ese momento,
possible
que
losses
básicamente fue lo que se
as
dio
a
en
result
Honduras
of excessive
y en
rain,
Nicaragua y un poco en
which is
Honduras
what happened in
hace agosto.
Nicaragua and a
Durante
little
la
bit in
cosecha, la
Honduras too
formalidad
this
del
year.
frijol se nace en la vaina
So
y
the
entonces
when we have
esto es lo
those humid
que
conditions,
vendría a aportar pérdidas
they affect the harvest and
específicamente al frijol.
they affect the beans and their
Gracias.
pods specifically. They can affect
Gracias,
beans.
Dimas.
Thank you.
No sé si hay algún otro
Thank
comentario o
you,
pregunta.
Dimas. I'm not sure if you have any other questions or comments.
Ok. Bueno,
Very
creo
well.
que no hay más. Mario, de verdad, muchas
We don't
gracias.
seem to
Como
have any
siempre, por
more. Thank you
la
very much,
información y por
Mario, for
aclarar
sharing that
las dudas.
information as usual and for
Si hay alguna
clarifying
pregunta que se
these
les ocurra
matters.
luego, me lo
If
pueden
you have any
indicar y con gusto
questions that you wish to
se la paso a Mario para que nos
convey to
ayude.
me,
Así que nuevamente,
I
muchas
will pass them on to
gracias.
Mario later so that he
Antes de
can
pasar a la
help us
parte
out.
de
Thank you very much once again.
la...
Muy buenos
Perfect.
días.
Good
Como
morning,
siempre voy a
everyone.
empezar con
As
el
usual, I'm going
índice de
to
los
get
precios al
started
término de la FAO
with
en
the
abril. Este
price
índice
index.
aumentó marginalmente
In
y se ubicó un
April, it
7%
marginally
por
went
debajo de
up
su
and
valor
it was
del abril de
7%
2023.
below the
Como
values
pueden
of
ver
April
en la gráfica de la
2023.
izquierda, la
As you can
diferencia
see
entre
in the
la
graph
línea
on
rosa
the
que
left,
denota
the
los precios de
difference
2022
between the pink
y la
line that
línea
shows
roja, los
the
precios de
2022 prices and the
24,
red lines
los
with
precios de
the
abril
pricing in
del
24.
2024 se encuentran muy por debajo del
If we
nivel
look at April 2024, they're
alto
well
registrado en el mismo mes del
below the
2022.
high levels that we found in the
El
same month in
aumento
2022.
intermensual
The
del índice en
increase
abril,
from one
perdón,
month to
índice
another
es
of the
el aumento,
index, sorry, within the
es
month of April,
debido
sorry,
al incremento de los precios de
is
carne,
due to the increase in
además de los aceites
meat
vegetales, los
prices
cereales, mientras que los
or
precios
vegetable
de otros
oil,
productos
cereal,
como azúcar y los productos
whilst
lácteos
the price
también.
of other
Entre los
products like
movimientos de
sugar and
precios que
dairy
se destacan,
went down.
quisiera mencionar los precios primero de
I would
la
like
carne,
to
que
point
subieron
out
en
that
abril
the most
debido a
noteworthy
una
increase in
demanda
prices
fuerte de los
is
países del
meat
Medio
in
Oriente,
April, given
donde
the high
la
demand
producción
in
avícola ha sido
Middle
afectada
East
por la
countries,
influenza aviar.
where
Y los precios
the
de los aceites vegetales subieron marginalmente en abril
where there
como
was an
resultado de la
where
alta
the
demanda
poultry industry was affected
internacional de
by
los
influenza,
aceites
and
de
then
girasol
also
y
there's
también
a
por
high
las
demand for
preocupaciones sobre la producción de
sunflower
pollos en
oil
Europa
and
debido a las
also the
condiciones
production
climáticas adversas.
of rapeseed oil,
En
given in
abril los
Europe,
precios se
given
encontraron en el nivel más
adverse
alto
weather
en los
conditions,
últimos 13 meses.
and in April they
Y
reached the
los
highest
precios
prices
de azúcar
in the last 13 months, and
en
the
la
price of
línea
sugar
naranja en la gráfica de la
that you can
derecha
see in the orange
descendieron en abril por el segundo mes
line
consecutivo. Y esto se debe a las
decreased
perspectivas
in April for the
positivas
second
de la
consecutive
oferta
month,
mundial y
given the positive
estuvieron un 15% por debajo de
of
sus niveles de origen.
worldwide, and it was 15%
La perspectiva
below the
positiva
usual
número
levels. Let's move on to the next slide, please.
sí. En los Estados Unidos, los
Very well. In the
precios de
United States,
exportación de trigo disminuyeron
wheat
ligeramente en
export
marzo
prices
y en abril, lo
had a slight
que
decrease in March
refleja
and
una
April,
menor
which
demanda del
reflects
trigo
a
estadounidense
lower demand
y
of
también las
US
condiciones de
wheat,
cultivo que se
as well
encuentran
as
por arriba del promedio.
the
Sin embargo, existe
growing conditions which are above average. We have some concerns about the impact of dry conditions in the southern region for the winter crops, which will be harvested from June, according to the official forecast for 2024-2025. The areas will, the harvested areas will be 4% lower than the levels a year ago, which is slightly below average. This is due to the fact that the prices, the normal prices in the areas sown are lower than those a year ago. And in Canada, the international prices decreased in March and April as a result of the low demand internationally and the competitive pressure. The offer for wheat is abundant after the record harvest in 2022 and the second highest in 2023. The official forecast in Canada shows an area sown that is similar to that of the year before, and it's higher than average for the season. As is the case in the United States, part of the country, in this case, the western part of the country, is facing dry conditions. Therefore, there is a concern about productivity and yield. Let's move on to the next one, please. Okay, regarding the export price for corn, prices in the United States have been stable in April after having grown in March. Prices were 35% below the level compared to April 2023, and the planting operations are they're underway, and in the Midwest, they're favorable. This year, the area sown is expected to decrease 5% throughout the year, given the low prices once again, and the area sown would be the average for the last 5 years. In South America, prices went up in March and April, despite the fact that there's a harvest underway, and the levels were below those of the preceding year as a result of an abundant offer. And throughout the year, it's been between 27 and 50%. In Argentina, the prices have increased as a result of the increase in exports of grain, together with plagues in the corn. And despite the record area sown, the production for 2024 is expected to be average or close to average. In Brazil, the decrease in harvest, or the expected decrease of the harvest, is exercised growing pressure. But the 2023 production was a record production, and even if we have a decrease throughout the year, the harvest this year would still be above average. Let's move on to the next slide, please. In the United States, after an increase in March as a result of a very strong international demand, the rice pricing decreased in April with pressure as a result of the official forecast that pointed to an increase of the area zone of more than 10% throughout the year. Prices were higher than those observed a year ago in April. And in Argentina and Uruguay, prices decreased for the third consecutive month as a result of seasonal pressure. In Brazil, there were seasonal decreases in February and March, but prices increased in April, given the fact that there were excessive rainfall in the south that caused delays in the harvest and also caused a concern regarding the yield. We should point out that from March 2024, prices in South America were more competitive than those of the United States. As you can see in the graph, the dark green line, which shows the last month, this dark green line is that of the US prices. And you can see that other lines, yellow, blue, and light green, are reaching higher levels, and they represent South America. And during the last few months, we have noticed that the rice pricing in the United States has been lower than those of other parts of the continent. And there has been and exports have decreased from other parts of the continent, and this has been observed in some of the higher prices. My presentation, this is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm available to answer them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John. If you have any questions or any comments, please raise your hand or communicate them via the chat. Or tell us about them via the chat. I don't believe we have any questions right now. I do have a comment regarding rice, what you mentioned about the rice. We need to continue to monitor the situation. And if you all agree, we will call Tito to join us in the next meeting in mid-May so that we can get further details regarding trading of grains in the region. And naturally, this is still evolving as prices in the different sources change, we'll get different results. Thank you, John, for letting us know about that. In that regard, it would be interesting to observe what the rice harvest is going to look like in the United States, because now the prices have surpassed levels of those in other sources or areas, given that the area zone is increased by more than 10%. If weather conditions are favorable, the harvest may also be quite good. And if we have an abundant supply, this may cause a decrease in the prices and may cause the prices to go down. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. I'll let you know what the forecasts are for harvest, and I'll let you know also about prices and how they progress. Thank you, Jung. I don't see any comments or questions for now. If anything comes up later on, please let me know and I'll pass them on. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to the third part of our presentation. I'll share the screen with you so that we can look at regional pricing. I think you can see it now. Okay, so I'm going to get started as usual, talking about inflation, which is an indicator that we've been following for several months now, or several years now, in fact, since we had an extraordinary situation in 21-22. And as you can see here in the slide, the general annual inflation, as well as specifically that pertaining to the food groups, has been stable throughout the last few months. If we look at the general inflation levels, if we look at March levels, they were stable, or we saw slight increases in Central America. However, it's important to mention that in 2023 it slowed down quite considerably. If we consider the peak in 2022 as a result of a combination of different factors, and this, the fact that it slowed down last year has changed a little bit here, and we can see more stable situation. If you look at the graph here, we don't see such a prominent change in terms of the decrease in this line here. We've had similar levels, in fact. This is a result of several situations which we need to take into account, because we've had prices that have been quite high, especially in 2022. In basic grains, it was mostly in 2023, which we will see later. But in 2024, we see that this slowing down has lost its momentum. Some of the reasons are increases in fuel, transport, energy, which we have found in the first quarter of this year. And it's also, especially in the case of fuel, quite volatile. We have to continue to follow it, but we see less changes in terms of inflation. And if we look at most countries, it's been slightly under 5%, depending on the different context in each country. Here we can see the brown line, which shows Costa Rica. That slowed down in terms of prices the most. We have already talked about this as a result of internal factors, the fact that the local currency has been strengthened, and other situations faced in Costa Rica. However, in the rest of countries, it ranges between 2 and 4, close to 5, save for Nicaragua, where we have a slight increase. But as you can see, it's very, very slightly over 5%. Something we need to mention about Nicaragua, as we will see in the next slide, is the fact that they fix fuel prices. They have done this since 2022, and they've set them at quite a high level, which is a factor that has contributed to this decrease. And it has also involved higher prices for food, which has led to inflation, which is slightly higher than the rest of countries in the region. Regarding inflation in food, we see a significant slowing down regarding last year. Then we see more stable numbers. In other cases, mostly it's under 10%. It's important to point out that seasonal trends are being distorted, and we may see different numbers in terms of the expected seasonal increases. We might have a bit of a delay, and in
situación
April and May
de precios,
especially,
pero
or lag,
igualmente
sorry, and we may have
aquí les vamos a compartir la
some
información más actualizada
increases in
en la
prices
próxima
then.
teleconferencia cuando
But
esté
we will
disponible.
share more
Algunos
updated
alimentos
information in
que
the next
mostraron
conference
alzas
once it's available. Some
en
food that
países como Honduras, por
showed
ejemplo,
increases in
Costa
countries like
Rica,
Honduras, for
México,
example, and I think in Costa Rica
Nicaragua, Turquía,
also, as well
donde
as
estos están
Nicaragua, if I'm not
bajos.
mistaken,
Eso es un
is, for
comportamiento
example,
nacional. Alimentos procesados
citrus
como la cebolla
products,
vegetal también
processed
mostraron
foods,
algunos
and
incrementos y esto
vegetable
ha
oil, which
estado
increased,
presionando más que todo
haven't showed the
el precio.
increase.
También es importante, ya teníamos un par de teleconferencias que
It's
no
also important
traíamos la
to
lámina de
point out
combustibles y fertilizantes. Acá
that we
pueden
had not talked
observar el
about
precio de
fuel and
la urea
fertilizers in
en
the
la
past. Here we can
lámina
see the price
gráfica
of
de la
urea
izquierda y el precio del diésel está
on
en
the
la
left
derecha.
and
Entonces,
then diesel
en el
on
caso
the
de los
right.
fertilizantes nitrogenados, para el propósito de la
Regarding
reunión y nada
nitrogenated
más
fertilizers,
traje
for the
estos
purposes
dos.
of this meeting,
El precio de la urea ha
I
sido
have
considerablemente inferior al
I
año
wanted to talk
pasado.
about this product.
Estamos hablando más o
Urea
menos
has
del
been
30 y
quite
40% dependiendo del país
below the
y
price of last year,
aproximadamente
between
20% menor
20,
al promedio
roughly
quincenal.
20%, depending on the country,
Venimos
and
de un
20%
pico
less than
muy
the last five
significativo por
years.
un shock
We've had a
en los mercados
significant peak
internacionales de
recently because of an
fertilizantes y el conflicto entre
international
Rusia y Ucrania que
fertilizer
agudizó
shock and the
la
conflict
situación del
between Russia
2022
and Ukraine,
y
which
se pueden
made
observar
the situation
claramente en el
worsen in
gráfica. Sin embargo,
2022.
a pesar de estas
And clearly you can
reducciones,
see that in the
pueden
graph.
observar los precios
However,
todavía se están
despite
subiendo, pero aún no llegan a
these
los
decreases,
precios de
prices,
2019-2020.
even though prices are
Significa que
going
hay
up,
una
they still haven't
reducción
reached the level, the
significativa y ya esto
levels of
también
2019,
tiene
2020. So
un efecto
even though
sobre los
there's
precios
been
de
a
los gramos
decrease
básicos. Es
and it's
importante
been
recordar que
significant, this had an impact
todavía
on
está un
prices
poquito
of
alto si
basic grains, but
consideramos estos
these
niveles
levels are still a
pre-pandemia.
little bit
El
high
promedio,
if we
y es algo
consider
que
the levels
también
before the
sucede
pandemic.
en el caso de los
So
granos,
averages,
recordemos que el promedio quinquenal, si
which
bien
also take,
sirve para suavizar los posibles
which are also
shocks que puedan
important for
haber
grains,
ocurrido en los últimos 5
and if we look
años o
at the
tratar
last
de
5 years and the potential
estabilización
shock
respecto a condiciones
in the last
normales,
5 years
los
when
últimos
compared to
5
normal
años que estamos
conditions,
considerando en este momento son un poco
if we
irregulares.
consider the last
Hay
5 years as a
terratenientes,
whole, they're a little
entra el
irregular. If
conflicto de
we
Ucrania,
look
entra
at the
la
pandemic,
inflación y
the
entran lluvias invernales.
Russia-Ukraine
Hay una
conflict, the
combinación de
inflation, the
factores que también
irregular
están
rainfall.
participando en un
So
promedio un
there
poco elevado.
are a
Podemos
series of
hacer
conditions that have
comparaciones
led
respecto a
to a
otros periodos de
higher
referencia si
average.
es necesario,
We
lo
could compare
podemos
it to other
revisar,
periods
pero
if
para eso
necessary. We
es
can
importante
discuss
tomarlo
this,
en
but I
cuenta.
feel that it's
En
important
cuanto
to
al
keep this in
precio del
mind.
diésel, como pueden observar en
Regarding the
la
price of
gráfica
diesel,
de
as
la
you can
derecha,
see
incrementó
on
ligeramente
the
en la
graph,
mayoría de
in the
países,
graph on the
excepto en
right,
Nicaragua,
it
donde les he
increased
mencionado
slightly in most countries
que hay
except
una
in
regulación de
Nicaragua, where,
precios
as I mentioned,
desde creo que
prices have been
marzo, febrero o
regulated
marzo de
since
2022. Si pueden ver,
February or March
digamos que
2022, I
prácticamente
believe.
estable.
You can
La
see the line,
variación
which is
que se
practically
observan se
stable, and
relacionan
we
más
see
con
slight
reservas
variations,
cambiarias, porque esto ya es la conversión
which
a dólar, pero el
are more
precio estaba
related to
fijado en
fluctuations in the
esta
currency
tarifa o
and
en este nivel que
the
para
exchange with the dollar,
2022,
but
como les decía, fue elevado y lo que
mostly
sucede es que a
they
diferencia
show
del
the
resto de
levels
países donde el
that are the
precio
same from
va siguiendo
2022.
las tendencias
And they're
internacionales,
quite
por ejemplo
high.
en
In other
2023
countries, according to international
en
trends,
Nicaragua se
have been
mantiene
going
ese
down.
nivel alto en
But in
donde se
Nicaragua,
realizó
they've
la fijación, ¿verdad? Entonces,
been fixed at the
bueno,
same
y
high
el
level.
mercado regional ha reaccionado
And
obviamente,
in
si
the
no están
regional
pendientes
market,
de la importación
there
de
has been a
petróleo,
reaction
ha
because
reaccionado
naturally
a
we
las
depend
fluctuaciones en el
on
precio internacional del
importing
crudo. Por lo
oil,
tanto,
and we've
a
reacted to the
marzo
international
de este
increases
año,
in the
el
price.
precio del diésel
In
puntualmente se mantiene entre 10 y
March, the
20% por
diesel
arriba del promedio,
prices were
pero
10 to
no ha
20% higher than
desacelerado
average, but
en
still
marzo
lower
del año pasado.
than those
Ya
of March last year.
pasando a la parte de granos básicos, voy a
And then
iniciar
if we look at
con
basic
maíz.
grains, I'm going to start
Bueno, en
with
abril, y quizás hacer también
corn,
anuncio que les agradezco muchísimo el envío de la información
white
del
one,
precio de
and
abril tan rápido, porque
thank you very much
pudimos
for sending the prices
incorporarlo
for April
ya
so
en esta
quickly,
teleconferencia para tener los
because
datos
we
más
were able
actualizados.
to
Así que muchas
include them
gracias
in this
a los
conference
temas de
and
información por haberlo
show
enviado
updated
a
information.
tiempo.
Thank you so much
Como pueden observar acá, en
for
la gráfica del
having
maíz, en
to the different
abril
information
los
systems for
precios se
sending it so
mantuvieron
quickly.
estables.
As you
Esto
can
es un
see in the
poco
graph, in April prices were stable
atípico considerando la
for corn.
estacionalidad esperada en un
This is
periodo
not
normal, donde ya deberíamos
normal
estar
for
observando alzas
according to the season where we should be looking at increases as the remainder of previous harvests starts dwindling and we look at scarcity, seasonally speaking. But if we look at the 3 seasons of the 2024-2025 cycle, we see relative stability in the price, with the exception of Nicaragua, where we've seen a more irregular behavior regarding the rest of the region. You can see the black here, and you've had important increases with a peak at on the second semester of last year, and then also decreases that are quite significant. And in April, we have an increase of about 13% with regards to March. And the reasons behind this, as you can see in the dotted line, could be uncertainty, speculation regarding availability of the grain in the future. If we take into consideration that the recent harvest was quite favorable in the case of Nicaragua, when we talk about the most relevant, there would be beans, but white corn is also important. And there were favorable results, but given the uncertainty looking towards the future, and there may be speculation from intermediaries. This is just a reference. It's complicated to check this in Nicaragua, as we all know, but we will continue to monitor this so that we can see how the situation evolves. Another interesting point is the fact that in February, I believe, this trend started to show. And by April, we could see that the prices were lower than those shown in 2023 in general. We have to be quite careful here because, as I was saying, in 2023, during April, we saw an increase. Right now, we're not showing the same seasonal conditions, but if we look at the prices, these are close to those of 2022 rather than 2023. In 2022, even though we had a very significant effect as a result of conflicts and the increase in oil prices. Before March, the situation was not as critical as you can see in the graph. However, I've pointed out the reference levels here. And it's clear that prices in 2024 are lower than those of 2023 and close to those of 2022. However, if we refer to 2019 once again, and I know this is in the past, but if we have an additional reference, prices are high in comparison. I just wanted to clarify this. Even though the prices have gone down slightly, if we compare them to last year's levels, it's important to point out that if we take into account the year 2019, they're still high. And if we look at the average for the last 5 years, we have different results. For example, in Nicaragua, we can see an important increase. In Guatemala, we can see that the price has also been 10% above average. However, in other places like El Salvador, the above the growth regarding average has been lower, and in Honduras has been lower than average, in fact. It's also important to mention that in the case of Mexico, even though this is not reflected here yet, we've had some difficulties given the dry conditions, which may affect the planting this year, and it affects beans mostly at this point. Regarding the forecast, the supply for corn will be close to average regarding the 2023-2024 harvest and imports. An important point is that imports of white corn have significantly increased in Honduras and El Salvador, which has also stabilized the prices or contributed to the stabilization of the prices. And we hope this, and we expect to see this trend entail that the availability of this inventory of imports will contribute to a pricing stability during the next few months. We can talk about it at the end of the meeting. Regarding the harvest, we expect it to be late or irregular, as we have seen is affected by the weather. And this irregular harvest as a result of high temperatures and rainfall would entail a second consecutive year where the seasonal trends have been distorted. And this may also distort price trends throughout the year. Regarding prices, they should be growing up to the average levels, and they should weaken at the beginning with regards to 2023, as the cost of fertilizers is weakened, and also it may have to do with the supply of grain. We know that in El Salvador, we have also had an extension with the tariffs, and I'm not sure about Honduras, if March is connected, but we can talk about it at the end. Regarding red beans, in April, the prices were strengthened in El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua as a result of a reduction in the yield of the harvest in Panta in Nicaragua, which is not only important in Nicaragua, but it's also important to understand availability during the rest of the commercial year for the rest of countries. We'd also like to point out that the results of the latter harvest were mixed results, not only because of rain, but other situations that Dima mentioned. And this means that this has led to losses or unfavorable conditions. I think this would be the fourth year or the fourth cycle where we've had difficulties with the regional production of red beans. Regarding the rest of the countries, prices have been stable with regards to preceding months. In all cases, however, prices are much higher than the 5-year average. Regarding April last year, we have mixed results. I'd like to talk about seasonal distortions because in the case of corn, it's clearer and the price has gone down regarding 2023, but with red beans, it's slightly hard to read this because of the distortion that we've noticed. We're practically comparing two completely different times of the year, so we have to be really careful when drawing an annual comparison. If you look at the graph on this side, this varies greatly from one country to another. In Honduras, it's increased. In Honduras, it went down. In Nicaragua, it was stable. So this has shown higher volatility with regards to preceding months. Regarding black beans, in April, prices were stable when compared to March. We have monitored and included the information for 4 countries, given the consumption preferences. In Guatemala, Costa Rica, and the Dominican Republic, they were stable. And in Mexico, they increased given the unfavorable conditions, including the droughts regarding that were reflected last year, but also will also affect the production in 2024 should they remain. in those three
temporada del
countries and in
invernal, a
Mexico,
excepción
the
de Colombia,
countries,
donde,
the prices of red beans have been
perdón, incluyendo Costa Rica, y en Costa Rica nada más la excepción es
stable
respecto al
for
año
the
anterior,
5-year
que sí se
averages.
registra una disminución
And
que
then in
no se
Costa
explica
Rica,
por lo que
the
se observa
exception was last year where we had a
en
decrease,
todos los demás
which is
productos.
consistent with what we see in other
Respecto a la
products.
perspectiva, la oferta
Regarding the
regional se
forecast
tanto de frijol negro
within
como rojo
the
se anticipa
regional
incrementar
supply
promedio
of
debido a
black and red beans,
producción por la
uh,
irregularidad de
it would
lluvias
be
y las
below
altas
average
temperaturas
because
en el
of
ciclo
irregular
de lluvia
rainfall
que
and high
se registra
temperatures
en 2
within
meses.
the cycle that will
La reducción
come
de
to an end in
rendimientos
2
que se ha
months, I believe.
registrado también durante la cosecha
Regarding
tanto
a
en
reduction in the
Nicaragua
yield
podría
that we have
contribuir
seen
a la
in
menor
the Apante harvest in
disponibilidad general de
Nicaragua, this
región
could contribute
y
to
eso
less
presionaría
a
los
lesser amount available
precios
within the
de
region, which would
exportación
of
de frijol
course
rojo desde Nicaragua que ya están
cause an
muy bajos.
impact in the
En
prices
cuanto al frijol
of
negro,
red
también se
and
espera
black
la
beans, of
reducción
red beans in Nicaragua, which
progresiva
are
de la
already high.
producción en
Regarding the black
Guatemala y
beans,
también las situaciones
the progressive reduction of the
extraordinarias que
production
vivimos
in Guatemala
en
and in
ambos
Mexico, given the extraordinary
en
conditions,
ambos
may
países.
limit
Por lo
the
tanto,
availability
esperamos que las
of this grain in both countries.
siendo muy
Therefore,
relevantes para sostener la oferta
we feel that this is
en
really
el caso de
relevant
frijol negro
to
específicamente son
keep up the offer
se ha
for
registrado
black
un
beans
aumento
specifically.
considerable,
We have seen
especialmente
a
en
considerable
Guatemala, un
increase,
incremento considerable de
especially in
importación
Guatemala, where we've
debido a
had a
la ejecución
considerable
recurrente de
increase
la
in
producción.
imports,
Acá todavía estamos
given
en
the
este ciclo,
recurrent
vamos a ver cómo se
impact
desarrolla
on the
este año
production.
y si
We,
se registra alguna afectación.
once we
Ya
reach
se
the end of the
tuvo
cycle,
algún
we'll
ciclo
see how it looks
consecutivo
this year.
con
If it's
reporte
affected, that would be the fourth
afectación
consecutive
por
cycle
tanto rojo como negro. Es
where
un
both
periodo
black and
mucho
red
más
beans have been
sensible
affected.
y por
And
los
these are very
periodos de
sensitive
cosecha
harvests,
también pues hay
given the
condiciones,
harvest periods.
podría darse una combinación de
We
condiciones
may
más
have a
desfavorables
combination of
para
more
este
unfavorable
producto.
conditions for this
En
product.
cuanto al frijol rojo, es posible que se
Regarding
mantenga,
red
lo más
beans,
probable es que se mantenga el déficit de producción regional,
we'll probably
que
have
podría
a regional
disminuir
deficit in production,
ligeramente, ¿verdad?
and
Todavía eso
this
está
may
por verse. Los volúmenes de
even
exportación de
this go down
Nicaragua,
even
debido a la
more, but we
situación de
still
los
have to see that.
rendimientos que han reportado,
If we look at the volume in
en el
Nicaragua
año, creo que fue
as a
en
result
2023, sí, en el ciclo de Apante
of
de 2023, que fue
the
bastante
Apante
favorable,
cycle in
sí se
2023,
registró un
which was
incremento
quite
en las
favorable, there was an
exportaciones de
increase
Nicaragua,
in
entonces
export from
esperaríamos
Nicaragua,
una disminución respecto
So we
a
would
ese
expect
punto.
a reduction from
Y
that
pues
point on.
también se esperaría que las importaciones de
And
otros
then
orígenes como
we
Estados
expect that
Unidos, Argentina e
imports from
inclusive
other sources
Turquía,
like
que
the
tuvo
United
una
States,
participación
Argentina, and even Ethiopia
importante el año pasado,
that had an
incremente
important
en
impact last year
2024.
will lead to an increase in
Cuanto a los
2024.
precios, se prevé que
Regarding
para ambas variedades de
prices,
frijol el precio se
we predict
mantenga
that for both
ligeramente superior a
types
lo
of
observado
bean,
en
prices
2023
will be
y
slightly
que
higher than
persista
those
por
of
arriba del
2023,
promedio de 5 años
and they will
dadas las
remain
situaciones
over the
que
last
mencioné.
5-year
Y
average,
adicionalmente al
given the
retraso
situations
en el
I've
inicio
already
de la
addressed.
temporada de primera, que si bien no es la más
Regarding
favorable
the
al sector
delay
frijol, ya nos da
in
un
the
indicativo
first
de cómo van a ir avanzando las siguientes
harvests, this
temporadas del
shows
año
us
por los sistemas de producción y la
what
forma de
how the harvest
producción
will
que
progress
existen en
throughout
la
the
región.
rest
Entonces, estos retrasos
of the year,
pueden
given the
extender la
production,
dependencia de las
the means of
importaciones y
production in the
continuar
region, which
presionando
could
al
lead
alza
to
los precios
dependency
por
on
un periodo
imports and
más
lead to increases in
prolongado.
prices
Finalmente, en
for a
el caso del
longer
arroz,
period of time.
en abril el precio se mantuvo estable
And last but not least, we have
respecto al mes
rice,
pasado.
where in
Esto
April
se
prices were
explica por las
stable
reducciones
in
precios de
comparison to the
exportación,
preceding
no
month.
es,
However, we have
hay
the same trend in
es
export
necesario un periodo de
prices.
reacople, así como en el
We
trigo,
see
entre
that it's
precios
necessary to
agrarios en
have
el mercado
a period
internacional
of
y los
time
mercados nacionales, ¿verdad?
to try
Regionales,
and
la estabilidad de precios en Estados
reach
Unidos
stability within the
ha
regional and international
influido
markets.
la estabilidad
And the
también
stability
reciente,
in the
si bien
United
han habido
States has had
incrementos
an impact
progresivos
on recent
y
stability,
pues
although
esta
there have
tendencia
been progressive
normalmente
increases. However,
reacciona
this trend
a lo que
typically
estamos observando en el mercado de nuestro principal proveedor de arroz.
leads to a
Vamos a ver,
reaction
igual como estábamos platicando con Jung,
because
cómo
of
va
what
a
happened with
evolucionar
our
la
main
situación y si
rice
el
provider.
precio comienza a
We have
ceder
talked
en
to
ese
John about it
periodo
to
por
see
una
what
mejora en las
how things
condiciones
evolve.
de
If in the United
disponibilidad y
States
también
there's
menor
improvement in availability and there's less pressure from sources in South America, we may see an impact here, but these are still early days, so we'll continue to monitor it. If you compare it to last year, we have mixed trends. For example, in Mexico, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic, the prices are higher than those of 2023. However, in other countries such as Honduras, Costa Rica, and Guatemala, we have more stability, which is also linked to the sources of exports, availability of inventories, importing costs, and other factors. But in all cases, the price of rice is higher than that of the last 5-year average. The forecast for rice is that the regional supply will be above average. And if we look at imports from the United States, they're 80% of the regional availability, with differences from one country to another, depending on how robust the production structure for rice is in the different countries. Related in this regard, in Costa Rica, Honduras, and El Salvador, it is expected to weaken in 2024, and that means that the demand for imports will increase in these countries as well as the region in general. Another thing is that when we look at the tariffs for rice and the tax reliefs, conditions will change from one country to another, but by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, it is expected to happen, and this has caused national production to decrease in the countries, given the difficulties to compete with US import prices. In the region, it is expected to have a dependency on imports, and they are expected to increase, given what I just mentioned. There would be moderate increases, however, this may change depending on the behavior of the international market. And after these preliminary conclusions, I'm going to hand them over in the presentation, just in case you need to check them. And I'll stop sharing just in case you have any questions or comments. I'm not sure if you guys have any questions or comments for me. Would you mind putting the conclusions slide up again, please? I believe you can see it now, right? Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or additional comments?
Okay. Bueno, si no hay consultas,
Okay.
les
If
agradezco
there are
la
no
atención.
questions,
Pasaríamos
thank you very much
con la ronda de
for your time,
discusión entre los
and
países.
we'll move on
Les
to
compartimos
the discussion
algunas
amongst
preguntas
countries.
o algunos temas más bien
I'd like to share some of the
para
topics
fomentar la discusión, más
to
que todo
foster this discussion,
relacionados con
mostly
la situación actual de la disponibilidad,
regarding
considerando
the
reservas
current
estratégicas en el caso de Costa Rica,
situations
los
about
hermanos de la
availability,
producción que están disponibles
strategic
y las tendencias de
reserves,
importaciones,
production,
entre
trends
otras
in
cosas. Si
import
les
trends,
pegaron ahí,
amongst other
si
things that we have pointed out.
prefieren iniciar.
I'm not sure how you'd like to start this, but
Vemos aquí un par de consultas. Sí, yo les voy a compartir la
I see a couple
presentación
of questions here.
luego de la llamada.
Yes, I will be sharing this presentation after this meeting.
Si les parece bien, iniciamos hoy al revés
If
con las
you
diferencias
don't mind,
horarias. No sé,
we'll
ingeniero,
start this.
si
We'll
tiene
flip this a little bit.
alguna actualización que compartir,
Given
algunas cosas.
the time difference, maybe Mr. Moscos, you can share it first. You can share your comments first.
Muy buenas tardes, buenos días.
Good afternoon, good morning for some of you.
Podría comentar un poco
What I can tell you is about what's happening here
de una
is that
sequía tal vez hasta el mes de junio,
despite what had been
ha ido
despite
cambiando el
forecasts of a
clima,
drought
¿verdad?
until
Ya en
June,
Panamá, en
the weather
algunas
has been
regiones se ha
changing, and in
presentado
Panama, in some
lluvias,
areas,
en
we
otros
have had
todavía se
rainfall.
mantiene el
In
nivel
others, we still
de
have
escasez de agua, lluvia. Sin embargo,
scarcity of
como producto el
rainfall and
clima sigue
water.
siendo inestable
However,
en la mayor parte
the
del territorio
weather has
nacional.
been unstable
Así que
in
eso es lo
most
que
of the
les
country.
pudiera comentar en materia de los
That's
precios.
what I can tell you
Entiendo que
regarding
por lo pronto se
prices.
mantienen bastante estables dentro de la
They
situación
are fairly
del
stable
país a nivel nacional, digamos de
nationwide.
lo que constituye pues la oferta y la demanda y en alguna medida
Regarding supply and
producto de
demand,
las importaciones, fundamentalmente en el caso de granos, pues de arroz y maíz.
what has taken over
Por lo
imports
pronto eso
is
es lo que les
grains,
pudiera
mostly
comentar
rice
así en
and
términos
corn.
generales. Un saludo y un abrazo.
Those are my general comments,
Muchas
but
gracias, ingeniero.
big hug for
Una
everyone.
pregunta, no sé si tendrá la
Thank
información.
you, Mr.
¿Tiene
Moscoso.
alguna
I
noticia
do have a question.
sobre
Do you
el
have any
canal? Porque sé que han estado experimentando dificultades,
news
este, la
regarding the canal? I know you've
supervisión del
been
tránsito
facing some
de
difficulties
carga
and you have to
recientemente, pero no sé si sabe usted
check
algo,
some
si
of
se ha
the
hecho alguna nueva revisión o si ha escuchado algo
transit
al
of
respecto.
freight recently, and I'm
Todavía
not sure
siguen
if you've
algunas limitaciones en
got any
cuanto a
comments.
los
Yes, we still have a
cruces,
few
sobre todo
limitations regarding
por la
the
carga,
crossings,
¿verdad?
mostly because of
Ustedes comprenderán que el abastecimiento de agua
the freight.
hacia los lagos
As you
que
can
extraen
imagine,
de este líquido
the
para
supply
ejecutar el
of
canal, más
water
que todo debe haber una mayor
for
intensidad de
the
lluvia
locks in the
en lo que son las cuencas
canal
del canal, ¿verdad?
entail that we
Por lo
need to
cual
have higher
todavía no ha
density of
sido
rainfall
consistente, no ha sido regular, por
in
lo
some parts
tanto
of the
todavía
canal, and this has not been
la
consistent
situación persiste, no se ha
in the
normalizado,
basin, and this has not
¿verdad?
been
Ya
consistent. The
casi
situation is
45
still
minutos
ongoing.
puede
It's not
estar
normal.
pasando
Typically, we
más o
have
menos se
almost
mantiene
40
un cruce diario
vessels,
alrededor de los 30 diarios,
but right now we have
digamos,
around
con menos
30 a
carga,
day,
¿verdad? Con menos carga.
and
Hay un
their cargo
tratamiento,
is
digámosle así, de
a lesser
carga
cargo.
del Pacífico al Atlántico y viceversa,
There's
de
been
contenedores.
cargo moving from the
Esto
Pacific to the
sucede porque
Atlantic
los
in
barcos
different
en alguna medida,
containers,
algunos descargan en el Pacífico,
but
otros en el
in some
Atlántico,
cases,
por vía
some
ferroviaria.
unload
Entonces
in
se ha estado
the
transportando
Pacific on the
una
Atlantic,
cantidad considerable de carga,
and
lo cual
they've
pues
used trains
posteriormente
to
se,
transport considerable
se vuelve
amounts of
nuevamente a cargar en
considerable
los
cargo,
puertos, ya sea del
and then
Caribe
it's been
o
loaded
acá en el caso
in
particular
the
en el
Cristobal
Pacífico.
port in the
La
Caribbean, and
situación
in
sigue
the
siendo
Caribbean
una
or in the
escasez de
Balboa
lluvia
port in the Pacific.
suficiente
We still have a
para
scarcity
normalización
of
y esperemos que no se
rainfall
logre.
with regards to normal
Muchas
levels, but we
gracias,
hope that this
ingeniero.
improves. Thank you very
No sé si
much,
hay alguna consulta
Mr. Moscoso,
para
engineer.
el ingeniero o algún
And
comentario.
do you have any question
Vemos.
for the engineer,
Bueno, le
for Mr.
agradezco la
Moscoso?
intervención.
No, I don't see any. Okay, thank you very much for
Quiero
your
ver República Dominicana, no sé si están
participation.
conectados, no
I'm
logro
not sure if
ver
the
a
Dominican
Janet
Republic is connected. I cannot
o
see
si alguien
Janet,
del equipo.
or if there's anyone
Si
from her
no,
team with us.
creo que pasaríamos con Priscila, que sí la vi hace ratito. Sí, de
Or
Costa
we'll
Rica.
move on to Priscilla from Costa Rica. I saw her a second ago.
Hola, buenos días, ¿cómo están?
Hello,
Bueno,
good
del lado
morning.
de
How are
Costa
you?
Rica, la sesión anterior les había
On the Costa
comentado
Rican
sobre el
side,
tema de la ruta del
well,
arroz, que esta fue una estrategia
during the
que
last
se
session,
usó
I
para
told
frenar
you
los
about
aranceles para el tema de la
the
importación. Sin embargo, pues el
rice
día de hoy,
route, which was used
em,
to
por
lower
un tema
tariffs.
de que los productores estaban
However, in March,
solicitando que
given
se
that
volvieran a hacer el
producers were
arancel del
requesting
34%, 35%, que era el que se
that
estaba utilizando,
we used
pues
the
por un dictamen del
34,
juez
35%
se
tariff,
canceló el tema
that's what
de este
farmers were asking for,
tipo de arancel que se estaba utilizando
a judge
y se va a volver
decreed
a aplicar el
that this
24 y el
tariff would
35%.
be cancelled,
Entonces,
the previous tariff would be
normalmente
cancelled,
en
and
Costa
the
Rica
tariff would
suele
go
coincidir
back to
con que
34,
hay una
35%.
revisión sobre los
This is the
precios
most important
finales en
news from
enero del
Costa
año
Rica
y
because
tenemos
we
precios
expect it to
similares.
have an
Entonces, el que se
impact
vaya a realizar
on the
adicional
price
a
of
la
rice for
decisión del
consumers,
juez,
and this is
se hizo un
the
reajuste de
trend that we're looking
política
at right now
monetaria,
in the
por
country. We
ende
also
el valor del
made an
dólar en nuestro
adjustment
país que estaba
in
un
our
dólar a
currency
510
And in the past, $1 was the equivalent of 510 colonies, but right now it's going up again. So this may have an impact on the price of all grains. Costa Rica is a country that significantly depends on international commercial partners to provide rice, beans, all grains in general. That's the most important thing we need to watch in more depth during the next few months here in Costa Rica. So by the next session, we will be giving you information regarding the consequences of these interventions in the country with regards to the rise and the currency, which may have a long-term impact on prices for consumers, as well as the supply of grains. And also regarding the bean harvest, it's reaching its end now. So by the next session, I can give you more details about the behavior in Costa Rica. In Costa Rica, there's only one region where it's harvested twice a year, and another two where it's only harvested during this period. So I would give you information about the end of this harvest next time. I'm not sure if you have any questions.
Cecilia, yo solo tengo una duda
Thank you,
rápida
Priscilla. I do have
con lo de la
a
ruta
quick
del arroz, porque
question
usted también creo que pedía
regarding the
indicaciones sobre la formación del
rice
precio
route or
de
route,
venta. No era solo era
because this
aranceles,
has
entiendo
an
que también
impact
había
on
una
the
regulación de precios, pero no
sales
sé si
price. It's
es
not just the
correcto.
tariffs. I understand that prices were regulated. I'm not sure I got that. Well, before we had the Rus and the rice route, we had Conaros, which was an entity that regulated prices. Now that we have Ruta del Arroz, or route of rice, this has had an impact. What happened is, as I pointed out before, many producers had a negative impact because of the 5%, 10% tariff increases, and they preferred to buy rice rather than produce it nationwide. So the producers started looking at slowing down that trend so that people could buy from them. And price regulation changed, the behavior changed, because in the preceding government, they had policies to make these changes, but the results were not showing. So would regulation come back, Priscilla, or is it only a matter of tariffs? Yes, they're only working on the tariffs right now. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions or any comments for Priscilla? Otherwise, we'll move on to Honduras. I believe we have Marcio here. Hello. Good morning. Hello, Marcio. Go ahead, please. Regarding the questions you have, if we look at the current situation of grains, we have supply of grains. The government is following policy in the Agricultural Marketing Institute, where we buy grain during the harvest, and then when there's a scarcity, they get supplied to Manasupro shops. So we have a strategic reserve, which is constantly updated. So the product is out there and it doesn't become obsolete, or it doesn't take too long to cook it. But we still have these reserves in the country, as expected, unless there's some kind of an anomaly. But from the 15th of May and on, we are expecting the rainy season to start. We believe that this year is going to be quite favorable. We're looking at comparisons, and it looks like it's a year that's similar to Mitch and Eta. Sometimes we want rain, and sometimes we want it to stop, but We're expecting a favorable year regarding rainfall, and they're getting ready for it in some areas. We have a serious issue with fires and smoke, and on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it was decreed that people had to work remotely in the public sector and schools also because of the high levels of smoke and the impact on people's health. This is something that we've never seen before in the Toncontin airport. It used to be an international airport and now it's only national, but for the last 4 days it's been closed. So we have a favorable forecast in terms of rain. We believe that we won't have a heat wave. We'll have a normal season for the harvest as expected. And the government has issued technological bonds or subsidies, which are handed out during the first 2 weeks of May to help people where there's food scarcity, and it helps some of the smaller producers. There was a slight increase in beans, but apart from that, there's been stability with the different products. Thank you very much, Marcio. Hilda or Gilda. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Marcio. Regarding this technological subsidy or bond, do you have any idea what kind of coverage you're going to have? Is it going to be the same as other years? Are there any changes? Well, I'll get you the official information. I'll send it through Monica, but we believe that this year is going to be similar to preceding years. However, I will get official information throughout the week for you regarding these vouchers, subsidies. I do have a question regarding the fires. Is this because of forest fires, or are they fires, controlled fires, or? Well, it's a combination of forest fires and then also cane. We know that we've had air pictures that show quite a large area in Mosquitia, like in other parts of Central America. If we look at the NASA images, there are quite a few fires. But given that in the capital we have like it's at a lower level, we know that it affects us a lot more because the smoke doesn't leave. But hopefully, when we get some rain coming up, it will help. Right now, we've had to prolong the remote work. We hope conditions improve. Marcio, thank you very much for the information. I don't see any questions right now. Okay, let's move on to El Salvador. We have Fernando here. I do have a question. I did ask a question in the chat. Sorry, Marco, I didn't see the chat. Give me a second. So, Marco's asking if you have predicted when rains will start in Honduras. Of course, Copeco issued a bulletin, and we believe they'll start this week in the Pacific area. And from the 15th of May, they will start nationwide. I'll send you the last Copeco bulletin so that you can take a look. It includes the different areas, and they show rainfall indicators. They've developed a map per month, but we expect that from the 15th, we'll have rainfall nationwide in most of the country. Thank you, Marcio. No worries, Marco. That's good news, yes.
Perfecto. No sé si hay alguna otra pregunta o comentario. Si no,
Great. I'm not sure if you have any more questions or comments. Otherwise, we'll move on to Fernando. Go ahead. Good morning. Well,
realmente porque dijiste quizás lo
I'd like to add to your
lo que está sucediendo
presentation.
ahorita en el mercado.
If we look at what's happening right now in
Y
the
es todo, o
market,
sea, realmente ahorita tenemos
right now,
tenemos un mercado bastante estable ahorita de
we
granos
have a
básicos.
stable market if we
Esto
look at basic
se da
grains.
porque las importaciones
This is
están,
because imports
están, están llenando el mercado, pues. O sea, tanto de maíz y
are
tanto de
flooding the
frijol.
markets. If we look at
Se dio un poco de
corn
boost
and
en el último
beans,
mes
we got a bit of an increase
de
during the last
precio,
month,
pero no fue,
price increase in the last
fue
month,
una semana y
but it
después
was
volvió
only
a
for a
estabilizarse.
week and then it was
No
stable
se
again.
da, no tenemos desabastecimiento, se están visitando todas las plazas,
So we don't
se
have
encuentra el producto.
any
Igual,
shortages. The product
teníamos
is
previsto que
in different
del
places
20
that we
en
visited.
adelante se
From the
empezaron
20th and on, we're expecting
y
to see rainfall.
con el apoyo también del gobierno que está dando
And if we look at
del bono
the
agrícola
support provided by the government with the agricultural
como una gift card
voucher, it's like a $75 gift card
su semilla.
for people
Ojo,
to
esto no
look
solo
for
para
fertilizers, for
agricultores
seeds.
de grano
It's
básico,
helping.
sino también
This is
para
not only for
almacenadores
basic
y
grain
hortalizas.
farmers, but also for those
Eh,
who plant vegetables.
se empezará a entregar del día 15 de mayo, se empezará a entregar.
So as
Y
from the
eso
15th of
parece
May,
bastante
they'll start
acertada
handing it out.
la propuesta del ministerio.
So the proposal from the
Entregarla,
ministry,
pero ahí a ver cómo son cómo
I
es
think,
la mecánica de entrega, ¿verdad?
is quite good.
Que
We'd
ya
have to
es
see
otro, o sea, el
how they're
ministerio
going to
sí
deliver it.
solo cancelará la gift card y ya
It looks
los
like the
servicios se
ministry
encargarán de toda la
will
logística de entrega.
hand out the gift cards and
Ahí, como
then
bien decías, o sea, los precios
they
estables,
will
el
deliver it to different
abastecimiento realmente
people.
algo
Prices have been stable
en
regarding
términos de estacionalidad, ¿verdad? Claro, porque en este momento tendría que estar el precio un poco más alto de lo que ha venido estar.
the supply's been good.
Pero lo
In
vemos
terms
en
of
las importaciones. No
seasons, we're
podemos
doing
verlo ahorita,
fine.
pero sí
Prices will probably be a bit higher,
vemos la
but
entrada de mucho producto
okay. If we look at
importado a las
imports,
plazas.
there
La
are
semana
many
pasada estuve en Gerardo Barrio
products that have been
y
imported in
todos
different
la mayoría de establecimientos
markets.
llenos.
I was in Gerardo Barrio last week, and
No sé qué más se le
most
podría decir. Eso, ahí
places
terminamos
are fully
mi
supplied with different
participación.
products.
Me gusta ver a Carlos
I'm not
Araujo
sure what else I can add, but that's the
Gracias,
participation of El
Fernando
Salvador.
y Mónica.
We like to see Carlos Araujo
Ay, qué gusto verlo, Carlos.
connected. Thank you, Fernando, Monica.
Gracias, Fernando, por la actualización. Yo tengo
It's a
una
pleasure to see you,
pregunta
Carlos.
rápida
Thank you,
sobre el
Fernando,
cambio de la
for this update. I
modalidad
do have
de
a quick
entrega
question
del
regarding
incentivo
changes
para los productores.
when delivering
Estos
these
recursos
incentives or these
va
subsidies
a
for producers.
poderse utilizar en
I'd
cualquier
like to confirm
servicio
something. Can this be
o hay como
used in
algunos rangos
for any
seleccionados
agricultural
de incentivo? No sé
purposes,
si sabe un poquito de
services,
eso.
or is this
Lo que se ha dicho,
only for selected
según mi
services?
conocimiento,
Well,
se reunieron hace como un mes con muchos
as far as we know,
dueños
around a
de
month ago,
agroservicios y que ellos son
they
los
met
que,
many owners
pero
of
hasta ahorita no
different
hay, hasta donde yo
agricultural
entiendo, no hay
services.
ninguna restricción que se pueda
And as
incluir
far
en
as I
estos
understand,
servicios.
there are no
Pero eso sí, tiene que ser
restrictions
la semilla,
in
tiene
all
que
the
ser
agricultural service
fertilizante,
for agricultural services, but it has to
para eso
include
de los
seeds,
son
fertilizers,
$75.
and others, and it
Perfecto.
amounts
Muchas
to
gracias,
$75.
Fernando. Gusto de
Perfect.
verlo
Thank
de
you very
nuevo,
much,
Carlos.
Fernando. It's a pleasure
No
to
sé
see
si hay
you
alguna
again,
pregunta o
Carlos.
comentario para El
I'm
Salvador.
not sure if you have any questions,
Si no,
Yo tengo una,
dele, adelante.
comments,
sí, con eso
Carlos.
de la nueva modalidad del bono, yo creo que va a venir a reactivar la economía
Regarding
en
the
cuanto a
new
mercados de insumos, porque la gente va, los agricultores van a
vouchers,
poder
I think
vender
it's going to reactivate
su
the
insumo de
economy
acuerdo a
and
sus
supplies
necesidades y
because
los
it means
agroservicistas
that
van a
farmers will be
poder
able to get these according to their
creo que si no
needs
estoy
and to
mal,
the
el
services in
Ministerio
the
de Agricultura publicó
local
que
areas.
había
The
firmado
Ministry of
con
Agriculture
25
published
agroservicios
this week
que aceptaran
an
esa
agreement
tarjeta.
with
Sí,
35
ojalá que
agricultural
se dé
services who are
seguimiento
accepting
pues,
this
a
voucher.
todos los agroservicios en la República.
We hope that
Lo otro que decía Fernando,
it can be used for all different
se va a
agricultural
utilizar
services
todo
throughout
como
the country.
importado, pues es por las
And
importadoras,
in
¿verdad?
terms
Ahora
of
veo que
the imported
está muy
products, I
débil
see
la
that
oferta, pues con las importaciones de
demand
granos y la
is quite
producción de
weak
la
and
cosecha anterior,
supply, if we look
pues
at
se tiene
grain
una
production
buena
and preceding
oferta que
harvests,
cubre
means we
la
have a
débil
good
demanda que tenemos
supply
en los mercados.
to
Y los
account for the
precios
weak
también
demand
por eso se
for
han
the weak
mantenido,
demand that we
porque
have, and
estaba
that's
viendo
probably why
los
prices
indicadores
have
climáticos
been
que, por
stable.
ejemplo, en El Salvador el primer trimestre
If we
fue
look at the
inusualmente
reports, the weather
seco, ¿verdad?
reports in El
Dos años
Salvador, the
la
first quarter
floración
was
en el café
unusually dry.
y lo que era
So
el inicio de
if we look at
en la caña de
coffee
azúcar se vio un
and
poco
sugarcane,
retrasada, ¿no? Entonces,
there
hasta
was a
la
bit of a
fecha,
delay
visto que ya hemos tenido, bueno, hay
in
clima que
April.
14
It
días
wasn't until April
tuvimos precipitaciones, 2
that
días
we
fueron
had
generalizadas y las
the
demás fueron así
rainfall
aisladas, más
for
que
two
todo en
days
Oriente, a veces
in
inusualmente
general,
fuerte
and in other parts there were
en
just
la
isolated
zona
areas,
oriental
mostly
lloviendo.
in the
Pero
eastern part of the country. And that's
considerando
unusual
estas
to have
lluvias
rainfall in the eastern
ocurridas,
part of the country.
lo que
But
sí se observa
this
en las
April
partes
rainfall
centrales
has
se
led
verán pues que
to
muchas
the fact that
poblaciones
in
no
the
están
central and western part of the
siendo
country, they're
regados.
getting
Entonces eso
their land ready to plant
ayuda un
grain.
poco a mantener
So that
de que vamos a
helps
tener una buena producción, ¿verdad? Y con eso cambio
helps
que
us
sostiene con
believe that we're
el
going to have
bono
good
de
production.
consumo, creo yo que
And then
pero
regarding
hay
the
que esperar, ¿verdad? Pero
voucher
parece
for
una buena
supplies,
propuesta, pues,
I think we have to wait,
de
but it seems to be a good
que
proposal
el agricultor va a tener el insumo
so that farmers
cuando
get
lo necesita.
these supplies when they need them.
Entonces, eso es bueno. Nada más eso. Muchas gracias, Mónica.
Gracias, Carlos. Muchas gracias por la información
Thank you very much,
adicional.
Carlos. Thank you for the
Em,
additional information.
algo les iba a bueno, tengo una pregunta, pero creo que es en general, así que ya
I
no
do have a
no
question, but I
los
think it's
tengo más.
general,
Terminamos con El Salvador. Gracias
so
de
I
nuevo a
won't
ambos y
delay
pasamos
this
con
anymore.
Guate para ir cerrando.
Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you for El Salvador. We're going to move on to Guatemala
Buenos días, perdón.
to conclude this. Thank you.
Buenos
Good
días,
afternoon
Danilo.
or good morning.
Sí,
Sorry. Good morning, Danilo.
bueno, en relación a las preguntas
So
o
regarding
que
the
nos compartieron, podemos pues mencionar algunas en cuanto a la producción nacional.
behavior, we're
Tenemos
going
todavía
to look at this in the
dato, ¿verdad?
national production. We
Estamos
don't
a
have any
espera
information.
de cómo se dé el
We're
tema
still waiting to see
de la primera siembra, ¿verdad? Entonces, que también está influenciado por la temperatura, las
what
condiciones
it looks like in the
climáticas. Entonces,
first
estamos todavía
harvests
en
according to the
espera de
weather
cómo vamos a llevar
conditions.
el proceso para poder hacer
And we're
estimaciones.
still waiting to
Entonces,
see what the
ahorita
process looks like so that we can
aún no se tienen información en cuanto a
run some estimates,
exportaciones.
but we don't have information yet. We don't have any
Nosotros
information yet.
hemos
Regarding
tenido,
inputs,
digamos, una dinámica de trabajo en el que
we've been
actualizamos los
following
datos muy constantemente. Entonces, lo
work
que
dynamics that include
hicimos fue
updating information
mostrarlo en un
constantly,
tablero
and we tried
y
to
déjame
include it on a dashboard.
compartirles en pantalla
I'd like to share
para
it
mostrarles un
on the
tablero que nosotros
screen.
tenemos y para
Let me show you the
los que
dashboard I have.
tengan eh, a bien
So that
visitarla. No sé si pueden ver mi pantalla.
Sí, sí, gracias,
you can
Danilo.
see my screen.
Este es un tablero de comercio exterior. Por ahora
This is the
tenemos
foreign
con
trade
granos
dashboard.
básicos, ¿verdad?
Right now we have basic grains
Por
in it.
tema de importaciones y exportaciones, el
And
origen de las
regarding
importaciones,
imports and
el destino de
exports,
la
if we look at the
destinación,
source of
¿verdad?
imports and the
Tema
destinations
desde
for
el año
exports
2019
from
a febrero del
2019
2024, esto lo
until
estamos
February
actualizando
2024.
mensualmente porque
This is
así
something
como
that we're
va
updating
actualizando
monthly.
los datos del Banco de Guatemala. Nuestra fuente es
The
precisamente el
Bank
Banco
of
de Guatemala,
Guatemala
¿verdad? Entonces tenemos
updates this information. In fact, they're our
un
source
pequeño,
of information.
¿cómo
So
se llama? Menú, ¿verdad? De productos.
we have a
Como les
menu
digo,
of different
en primera
products,
instancia tenemos temas de granos básicos, que es lo que
and we have basic
pueden
grains
ver
here.
en este
that we can see in this
podemos ir viendo acá,
dashboard right
al
here.
cambiar de producto, pues nos van cambiando también
We need, as we
las
change the
gráficas,
products, we
cuánto
change the
de
graph.
el volumen en valor
And if we look at the
y
volume and
una
the
estimación
value,
del precio promedio,
as
¿verdad?
well as an
Anual
estimate of the average price
de
per
cada uno
annum.
de los rubros, digamos, importaciones y
This is
exportaciones,
shown for
diferenciar
each one of the
el
different
origen
categories,
de ellos, el
including
promedio también, y si
imports,
quisiéramos
exports.
tener información
We
de
look
un
at the
año
source,
específico, pues en este
and if
caso
we need
colocamos el
information for a specific year,
2024, también nos cambia
let's
y
choose, for
el valor
example,
del origen
2024.
de las
We can
importaciones
also
del
get the
promedio
information
también
here.
cambia.
And if we look at the
Entonces,
source of imports
yo les puedo
for
dejar
2024,
el
this also
link
changes.
en el chat para que puedan
So I'm going to give you the link in the
conocerlo,
chat
¿verdad? Y ahí
so
están,
you can
digamos, todo el tema
take a
de
look.
volúmenes y
And
valores
this
de las
includes
exportaciones
all the
en
volumes and
temas de granos básicos,
values for
¿verdad?
different
Entonces, eso
exports
es
of basic grains.
por otro lado, podemos decir que
On the other hand,
el,
we can say that
podemos decir que el mercado se encuentra abastecido, ¿verdad?
the market
Según
has a
información
good supply
de nuestros mayoristas
according
informales
to the
que se encuentran
information
en el mercado de la terminal,
of
ya han tenido producto, bueno, de la última
wholesale
cosecha, algunas
of our wholesale
reservas y también
representatives in the
importaciones,
market.
producto de importación que se mira en el
We
mercado.
have
Entonces,
import products
podemos decir que el
on
mercado está
stable levels in
abastecido,
the
¿verdad?
market,
En cuanto a
and
contingentes,
the market seems to be well supplied.
ya lo había
Regarding
mencionado
contingencies,
en reuniones anteriores, tenemos
we had mentioned this in
contingentes para
preceding
4 productos,
meetings. We have
maíz
contingencies
amarillo,
for 4
maíz blanco,
products:
frijol
rice,
negro. El único que no ha
yellow
sido utilizado
corn,
es
white
el de maíz
corn,
amarillo, que tiene
black
un
beans. The only one we've
27.78%
used is
de uso.
27%
El volumen activado es de 750.000 toneladas.
use, and we have 750,000 tons
Mientras que los demás granos,
worth of it.
arroz,
For the other
51.000
grains,
toneladas
we have
métricas, frijol blanco,
70,000
55.000
metric
toneladas métricas y
tons,
frijol negro,
55,000 for
toneladas métricas.
white, and black
No se tiene un
beans,
registro de uso.
15,000
En el
metric
caso
tons.
de maíz blanco y
We
frijol negro,
don't,
entraron
in
en
the case
vigencia
of
a partir de la primera semana
white
de mayo,
corn
es
and
decir,
black
el 1 de
beans,
mayo, ¿verdad?
they started
Entonces,
on
precisamente por
the
eso no
first week of
tenemos
May, from the
registro
1st of
de
May.
uso.
So we don't have any
Esto
records
permite
for this,
el abastecimiento también de los mercados. Seguramente
but
las
this allows for
exportaciones
the
podrían
supply
pues,
within the markets,
aumentarse
and
con
imports
estos
may
contingentes
increase with
autorizados.
these authorized contingencies.
En cuanto al inicio de temporada de la primera,
Regarding
pues
the
basado en nuestro sistema
first
de monitoreo de cultivos, vemos algunas
harvest,
actividades de
if we
preparación de
if we
tierra
base
en el
this on the
área del
monitoring of
altiplano.
the
Hablamos de San Marcos, Quetzaltenango, Totonicapán,
harvest, if we look
¿verdad?
at
Sin
Tenango,
embargo, los
Totonicapan,
agricultores pues están en la expectativa de qué pueda
farmers
pasar con el tema de la lluvia, ¿verdad?
are waiting to
Están
see what
esperando el
is going
establecimiento
to
de la
happen.
época
They're
de
waiting for
lluvia
the
para que
rainfall.
podamos
They're waiting for the rainy
cultivar.
season so they can
En
start
otras
planting.
áreas vemos ya
In
siembra,
some areas,
vemos ya
we can see
pero
that
son
they have already
bastantes,
planted,
digamos,
but
son áreas focalizadas, podríamos decirle, ¿verdad?
these
Pero
specific areas,
el comentario general, la opinión general es
in general, the general opinion is
que esperan el establecimiento de la época de lluvia, ¿verdad?
that
Creo
we're
que esa es la
waiting for
información
the
que
rainy
les
season
podría compartir
to settle.
respecto a los temas
That's the information I can share
eh,
regarding
que están en la mesa.
the different
Perfecto, muchas
topics we
gracias,
put on the
Danilo. Muchas
table.
gracias por
Thank
compartir
you.
el
Perfect.
tablero.
Thank you very
Felicidades,
much,
la verdad
Danilo.
que
Thank you
me
very much for
parece que es
sharing this
una súper buena
dashboard.
herramienta.
Congratulations. I think it's a
Eso solo para
really good
confirmar,
tool.
eso está
Just to
disponible al
confirm
público.
with you, is this available to the public, Danilo?
Sí, de hecho les
Así
acabo
es.
It is.
de colocar el link
Yes.
en donde lo pueden
You here have the link
consultar.
where you can
Y
check it.
ahí no está, no estoy segura, ahorita lo estoy
Again,
abriendo. ¿Está la
I'm not
información de los
sure
contingentes
because I've
o
just
no?
opened it, but does this
No,
include
Todavía no.
ese es
contingencies information?
importaciones
No,
en general.
Perfecto.
that's for
Perfecto.
imports in
Muchísimas
general.
gracias por compartirlo
Perfect.
y
Thank
por
you very
presentarlo
much for sharing
en
this
este espacio.
and for presenting
No
it
sé
in
si tienen
this
alguna pregunta, si alguien tiene algún
at this time. I'm
comentario.
not sure if you have any questions, any
Paraguay.
comments for Guatemala.
Creo que no. Solo
I
les voy
believe
a
not.
dejar una pregunta muy general en caso caso que
I'm
alguien
just
tenga
going to
información,
give
Jung
you a
sí creo
general
que nos
question in
dirá
case you haven't,
temprano de la
in
reunión
case you need any information. Jung had to leave the
motivar
meeting
si
early,
había
but
alguna información
she asked
de
me
reporte en los países sobre posible
to see if
disminución
there were
en
any
la
reports in the
siembra de maíz,
countries regarding
de maíz blanco por los
a
precios
decrease
que están
in
más bajos que el año pasado y también por la perspectiva climática. Yo
white-born
sé que estamos
areas,
temprano en la
given
temporada, pero si alguien tuviera información,
last year's
se lo
prices,
agradecería.
given the weather conditions. If anyone has information, please pass it on. We would appreciate that.
Ok. Bueno, si no, que nada más nos quedaría acordar la fecha de la próxima reunión. Yo
Then
creo
the
que
only
nos
thing pending would
toca
be to
ver
agree on the date for the next
el 19 de
meeting,
junio,
which I
miércoles
believe would
19
be
de junio, no sé si les parece
Wednesday, the
bien.
19th of June, if that's okay with everyone.
Si alguien tiene alguna complicación con la fecha, igual me lo indican. Si no,
This date
a medida que nos acerquemos, van a
mm,
estar
is an issue for
de
anyone, please let me know.
recibiendo la invitación de parte de Rina.
You will be getting the
Y
invitation
pues nada más
from the invite
agradecerles
from Rina.
nuevamente su
And I'd
participación
like to
y su
thank you
presencia en
once
este
again for
momento y
your
nos vemos
participation
en el
and for being
28.
part of this
Muchas
meeting.
gracias y que tengan un
So we hope to see
buen
you all
resto del
again
día y de la
in
semana.
June. Thank you very much and have a great rest of the day and the week.